Access Control List Part 1. Access Control List ACL is a list of conditions being used to group IP packets or MAC IP packets. Now, when those IP packets are being grouped now depends on what you want to use that to achieve. Whether you want to use it for policy routing, for route map, or for the purpose of traffic filtering. But at the CCNA level, we'll be taking a look at how to implement Access Control List ACL for traffic filtering. Now, let me give you a scenario to drive my point home. Now, imagine you are the newly employed senior network engineer for ADC Nets. Now, the management has been so worried about the data confidentiality and integrity of their management servers so that unauthorized users don't have access to management servers. Now, you will be tasked to ensure the following. 1. The customer care department doesn't have access to the management database to ensure data confidentiality. And secondly, they want the IT support department to not have access to the management database except the lead IT support. So imagine if you are given such a task to accomplish. So how do you achieve that? How do you implement that? So one of the various ways where you can actually get that done is through ACL. So for this class, we're going to be taking a look at the different types of access control list, talking of the standard and the extended access control list, then where you can actually deploy both. Then after that, we'll take a look at how to build the access control list. So understanding the wildcard mask, then taking a look at the access control list considerations. Then after that, we'll take a look at how to apply the access control list. Then to wrap up this class, we're going to take a look at the lab configuration. Okay, so let me try and explain the types of access control list that we have. Now, there are two types of access control lists. We have the standard access control list and we have the extended access control list. Now, for the standard access control list, any list that you have from 1 to 99, that represents the standard access control list. Now, for the extended access control list, then you have from 100 to 199. That is for the extended access control list. Although even for the standard access control list, you could still have from 1300 to 1999. Okay. Now, for the extended access control list as well, you could have from 2000 to 2699. So meaning for standard access control list, you have list 1 to 99, or from list 1300, 1300 to 1999. Now for extended access control list, you have list 100 to 199 and list 2000 to 2699. Now, the difference between the standard access control list and the extended access control list is that 1. For the standard access control list, the filtering condition is based on just the source IP address, the source IP for the standard access control list. But for extended access control list, that one is more granular. So you can filter packets in extended access control list based on both source IP, and destination IP. You can even filter based on protocols, and you can even filter based on port numbers for extended access control list. For instance, in the extended access control list, on a particular server, let's say on a particular server, a multi-purpose server, maybe that has, let's say, FTP, so it's a file server, and HTTP, web server. Now, I could say I want clients, clients, to have access to only the web resource on this server, while denying them access to FTP server resource on that same server. So let's assume that the server is 200.10.10.1. Okay, so on this single server 200.10.10.1, I'm giving them partial access to resources on this server. Partial access. For the web traffic, they will have access, but anytime you're trying to download on this server, they will be what? Denied. So you can only get this kind of a thing done on extended access control list, not with. Okay, so let's take a look at some considerations that you need to take note of when building your access control list. So now for your access control list, of course, to configure that from your router configuration side, config. Now for the standard, you start by saying access list, followed by the list number. So since I want to build standard access control list, if I say access list and I say 10, now because this 10 is within 1 to 99, it means I'm trying to set up or build a standard access control list. So if I say access list 10 and I say, let's say permits, and I say 10.10.10.0, okay, and again, and I say access list again, and I say 10 again, and I say deny, 10.10.10.1. Okay, now the first consideration is this: when you are building your access control list, now all statements that are tied to the same list, they form one single list. All statements tied to the same list number, rather, they are going to be within the same list. For instance, because look at my own first statement, access list 10 permits 10.10.10.0, and access list 10 deny 10.10.10.1. Let me say 0.0.0.0 here. I will explain this much later. 0.0.0.255. Okay, now the both statements, the two statements, they have access list 10. So what does that mean? It means both of them form one single list. If I say access list 11, of course, permits or deny, it doesn't matter. You should know that means this is odd one out, meaning it's going to form a separate list. It's like you having the first list somewhere around here, and you call the list 10. You now set up another list, you call it list 11. So definitely list 10 and list 11, they are not the same. So the first two statements, they are tied to this access list 10, and this third statement is the odd one out because it is tied to this second list. So these are two different lists. So that is the first thing you need to take note of. Now the second consideration when building up your access control list is that when you are listing your statements in the access control list, you list those statements in order of importance. You list those statements in order of importance. For instance, look at the list that I've built now. In my list, I have two statements there. Of course, this last one is odd one, so it's a different list. So I have two statements here. The motive is this: I want to permit all clients within this network 10.10.10.0 access, probably to a particular server. Now, but I want to deny 10.10.10.1. Of course, you should know that 10.10.10.1 is within the network 10.10.10.0. What I want to achieve is I want to deny this guy while permitting others. Again, I want to deny IP 10.10.10.1 and I want to permit others. Meaning, out of the 254 hosts within this network, I'm only denying IP address 10.10.10.1. I'm permitting IP address 10.10.10.2 to 254. I'm permitting .2 to 254. Now, with the way I've set up my access control list, this is wrong. Why? Because the router rather, will end up permitting all the clients within this network, all the clients, meaning from .1 to 254. All the 254 clients contained within this network address will be permitted. Why? Because the router executes the access control list or statements within access control list in sequential order. Again, the router executes statements within an access control list in sequential order. And once there's a match, the execution will what? Terminated. The router stopped executing that list. Meaning, once there's a match, the router doesn't take a look at the next statement. So, I said this list is wrong. If my intention is to deny 10.10.10.1 access to the server, permitting others, the router will end up permitting all the clients, including even this one I want to deny. Why? Because when the packet gets into that router, and the router needs to run the ACL on it, so it will ask, are you IP address 10.10.10.1 to 254? Because the first statement says permits any client within 10.10.10.0 network. So if IP address .1 comes in, which is 10.10.10.1 comes in, the first thing that the router will ask is, are you within this network address? And of course the answer is yes. And what does the statement say? The statement says permits 10.10.10.0. So what does that mean? Even IP address .1 will be what? Permitted. Because there is a match already. So it means the router will not even take a look at the second statement. So this will not be executed. Statement 2 will not be executed because you already have a match. So what does that mean? You list your statements in your access control list in order of importance. So what is the right way to list this? The right way to list this is for me to say, I will say permits, that is access list, and I will say deny 10.10.10.1 with card mask 0, 0, 0, 0. Then I will now say access list 10. I will now say permits 10, 10, 10, 0 with card mask 0, 0, 0, 0, 255. This is the right way of listing the statement within the access control list. What does that mean? With this now, if IP address .1 again comes in to the router, IP address .1 comes into this router, the router will ask again, are you 10.10.10.1? And the guy says yes. It means you are going to what? Deny. But others from .2 to 254, when they come into the router will ask, are you 10.10.10.1? The answer is no, because there is no match for the first statement. Then it will look at the second statement. The second statement now says, are you 10.10.10.0 nets? That is, are you within that network range? And of course, the answer is yes, because .2 to .254 is within the range. 255 is within the range. What's it called? Is within the network range 10.10.10.0. So in that case, those other guys, the other IP addresses from .2 to 254, all of them will not be what? Permitted. So that's the next consideration that you need to take note of. So when you are listing your access control list them in order of what importance. those that are very, very important first.